today looking for a dance, that tomb is empty as well. No dance today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you that you have risen, that you are with us, that your Spirit is with us, Lord. We just ask that you would just open up your word to us today, that you would open up our hearts and our minds to understand and to be obedient to what you call us to do, Lord. We praise you today. We thank you for what you've done on the cross for us, that our sins are forgiven, that death has been defeated, Lord. We just praise you for who you are. We just ask that you would just bless this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, if you want to look at Psalm 22 just a little bit, Jesus repeats the opening words of that psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? These words of the Psalms have made it memorable. What is not well known is that the dark lament of the psalmist turns to reflect words of hope and deliverance towards its end. And as the dark opening words parallel Good Friday, it also parallels today what we celebrate as well. If you'll read just the second portion of that, starting in verse 20, it says, "Deliver me from the sword, my precious life, from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lion. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring a people yet unborn. He has done it. He has done it is what the psalmist from long ago predicts. Easter Sunday clarifies what the psalmist is talking about. And so as we look at Mark's account showing the fulfillment of this psalm, we will look at this announcement that the young man dressed in white is talking about. This young man answers the question in three different ways. He has done it. Death's power is destroyed. Amen? Death's power is destroyed, and we celebrate that today. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? As we look at the second half of verse 6, the two Marys, right? It's a little easier to say that. Have come to the tomb because they want Jesus to have dignity in his burial. They come to the tomb carrying fragrant spices, intending to place them within his burial shroud, as was custom. But upon their arrival at the tomb, they experienced several surprises. First, the heavy stone that Joseph had laid before the tomb that had a seal placed on it was no longer there. Jesus' body is missing. Amen? His body is missing. Last, instead of seeing the decomposing body of Jesus, they see a young man dressed in a white robe. Now, in all this, I reflect back to my grandmother. Not the nice grandmother, the mean grandmother. And I remember one day, my brothers and some of my cousins, we were staying with my grandmother that summer, and we had torn up my great-grandmother's flowers, who lived right next to my grandmother's house. She had these beautiful flowers all over her yard, and we picked them and threw them all over the place, and my grandmother was horrified to see this, not because we had destroyed these beautiful flowers, but my grandmother, actually, she had gone through several miscarriages and had buried her children in those spots and planted flowers. And I, of course, did not know that, and neither did my mother. And usually my grandmother would go to the backyard, and she would get a willow branch and whoop us, right? Not once, not twice, but a lot. But she didn't do that this day. She instead not guilted us, but she explained why these flowers were so important, not only to my great-grandmother, but also to my grandmother. And I can imagine these ladies going to the tomb of Jesus, expecting things to be in a certain way, and they were not, right? Who knows what their expectations or their understanding was, but it was not what they were expecting. The tomb was not in the place, in the condition that it was supposed to be in. And so we see some reactions with them. Maybe they thought they were in the wrong tomb. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe my grandma thought, maybe I'm in the wrong yard. Maybe these flowers aren't to my mother, who these mean that are so precious to her. But the messenger must have recognized their intentions. The messenger must have understood the concern that was going on in their minds, and he quickly reassures them, you are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? In life, Jesus has taken the time to tell them repeatedly about his coming, about his death, and about his resurrection. These three women had stood near Jesus at the cross, had later accompanied Joseph to his very tomb as he carried Jesus' dead body. But what they had not fathomed was that though Jesus was going to die, that his resurrection was going to be real. They weren't ready for that. They weren't expecting that as they went to the tomb that day. And so there simply was no money to anoint with the spices. They had no task to perform at the tomb. There was no reason to be there. Jesus was not there. He had risen. He was gone. And I can think of many times in my life that Jesus has had that empty tomb experience for myself as well. And I remember out of several of those times in my life, one of the most important ones was when I was in college, and I had a roommate who was paying my rent, and so I budgeted accordingly, and he had urgent business back from the country he was from, and all of a sudden I had to find another place to live. $50 a month, right? Not a lot of money, but I did not have $50 a month to spend on rent. And I did find myself able to find a place that allowed me to stay there. It was dark. It was dirty in the basement of a family's home. And I remember thinking to myself, there is no point of me being here. One, I hate school, right? Can I get a no amen back there?
No.
What?
No.
Right?
They love it. They love school.
They love school. So I found myself in this dark, dirty place, thinking, I hate school. What am I here for? My friends, they don't want to be around me because they know I need money, right? You usually get away from those friends, right? They need money and you know they're going to hit you up. And so I remember just being in this place at this time, but I quickly realized in my prayers to the Lord and seeking Him and seeking His Word, really for the first time, of seeking what it is that God wanted to teach me in this situation, that there was a purpose for my being there. And the ladies here, they see that there was a purpose as well. For them in that moment, it looked like emptiness as many times as their eyes would blink. Jesus' body was still gone. Yet their presence in the empty tomb is very purposeful. As we know, God doesn't waste those empty times in our life when we feel like, what's going on? Why am I here? And maybe some of you have been in that situation. Maybe you're getting ready to go to college, right? That empty feeling that you don't know what's going to happen. Or maybe your friend is going to go to college and you still got your senior year to go to, right? That empty feeling. Calling them out, right? Maybe your parents are moving away. Possible. We're waiting on that, right? This empty feeling of not understanding what it is that God is doing. These three women stand as a witness to the truth of the resurrection. He has risen. And I hope that you find that in this empty times that maybe you find yourself in, or maybe those times that you found yourself in, you realize that He has risen even in those circumstances. Here, the it refers to the bodily resurrection of Jesus. That's the first part of the young man's message to the women. And I believe that Christ still uses his resurrection power. Amen? That even in the emptiest and the darkest and the dirtiest places that we find ourselves in, he has risen and he has a purpose in those times. Have you experienced that resurrection? Secondly, he has done it. Restoration is available. And we see in verse 7, go tell his disciples and Peter. And so in addition to being first-hand witnesses to the resurrection, the young man now gives the women two tasks to perform. In these words, there is a hidden joy that is given. First, we see that there is hope, that Jesus isn't dead, that he has risen from the grave. But we also see another little nugget there as well. Christ is not holding grudges, right? Just as he initially called them to be his disciples, he renews their calling as well. And just as Jesus had predicted his own death and resurrection, he also predicted that all of his disciples were going to scatter, that all of them were going to leave him and behind and abandon him. And so as we look at Mark in chapter 14, verses 27 through 31, it has just to recount that situation. It says, "You will all fall away," Jesus told them, "for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." Peter declared, "Even if all fall away, I will not." "Truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows, twice you yourself will disown me 3 times. But Peter insisted emphatically, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the others said the same. But only hours later, we see in the account of Mark that Jesus is arrested in the garden with these words, "Then everyone deserted him and fled." And so when the women finally deliver the news to the disciples who are hiding in fear for their lives, they must have been a crazy bunch of women, right? Anybody have those in your life? Crazy bunch of women? No? There we go. Some of you are smarter than me and would not get that. But what's implied is that the news of the resurrection, the news of restoration, is of the relationship. If we look at the message, especially, it singles out Peter. Go tell his disciples and Peter, right? I can't imagine what was going through Peter's mind and what was going through the emotions that he had that day. Of all the disciples who disowned Jesus in his last hour, Peter's actions proved to be the most condemning. Everyone turned and ran. Peter at least bravely went to the home of the high priest where the trial was happening at the Sanhedrin. While there, Peter faces 3 challenges to his identity as a follower of Jesus. 3 times, Peter denies knowing even who Christ is, or that he had any association with his disciples. And if I was Peter and I heard that Jesus was alive again, I can't even imagine what was going through. I'd be both probably afraid, ashamed. Would Jesus require punishment for what I had done? Would he even acknowledge me as his friend anymore? The news the 3 women brought must have been astonishing to Peter. Go tell the disciples, and especially tell Peter, right? Or if you're the mom, hey, make sure you tell that guy Peter, I'm coming for him, right? Right? Maybe we can read into those thoughts that Peter might have had. But William Barclay writes that he finds the two words "and Peter" to be the most precious in this passage. Barclay continues his comments, how that message must have cheered Peter's heart when he got it. He must have been tortured with the memory of his disloyalty. And suddenly there comes a message, a special message for him. He of all the disciples especially picked out his characteristics of Jesus that he saw, not at all of the wrong Peter had done him, but altogether of the remorse that Peter was undergoing. Jesus was far more eager to comfort the penitent sinner than to punish the sin. Someone has said the most precious thing about Jesus is the way in which he trusts us on the field of our defeat. However, in all of this, I believe that this time in Peter's life was the most instrumental in setting his resolve to follow after Christ. We see it even until his death, that Jesus was his Lord and Savior, that nothing else mattered in his life, that he was going to follow Jesus till the very end. But lastly, we see that he has done it. The journey continues. The young man now tells the three women where they will find Jesus, right? It's the message they are to deliver to the 11 disciples. He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Not only has he done it, not only is the resurrection true, but the journey continues. In each one of our lives, sometimes we accept his resurrection in our life. We accept his salvation that it receives us, but he also calls us to go forward. He calls us to be his disciples. He calls us to be his chosen people that would go out and tell others about what he has done. Not only has he done those things, but he calls us forward. David Garland helps us to understand the impact of the announcement. Jesus is going ahead of you is as important as a word that he is not here. While we don't find going ahead to be significant, the expression of the young man uses indicates Jesus is acting as a general, leading his troops forward. Garland concludes, just as the earthly Jesus led his right disciples to Jerusalem by going before them, so the risen Jesus goes ahead of them, still leading the church. Have you found that he's not here anymore? Sometimes we find ourselves in our lives when we're kind of living in a rut, and Jesus is waiting for us. He's not wanting us to be in that place of just living life, but he's called us forward. He's called us to be his people. He's called us to spread the good news that he's no longer in the tomb, but he's risen, and he has a resurrection life for each and every one of us. There's a bit of irony in this invitation as well. There you will see him. And I have to ask, where is that place in your life? Where is that place in your life that he's waiting for you? Some of you may be stuck in this place in life, and you've been waiting for something, but Jesus is waiting for you to get with the story. Where is Jesus waiting for you? But we also see that the resurrection removes their spiritual blindness, and for the very first time, they will really see Jesus for who he is. Mark ends his Easter morning account very curiously. In verse 8, it reads, trembling and being bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And unlike the other Gospels, Mark does not include any Easter appearance of Jesus. We see 9 through 20 plus. Scholars say that was added on much later, that account didn't happen. We see it also in the other Gospels that Jesus does return and speak to the disciples, but in Mark, he leaves it out. And Garland writes, this incomplete ending has Christ still waiting symbolically in Galilee for his followers to come, and forces us to ask whether we will go to meet him there as well. Will you go and meet him there as well? What's going on in your life? Are you still living over here when Jesus wants you over here? Have you accepted the resurrection life that he has to give each one of us? Are you truly living the life that God has called you to? Listen to the words of Brian Wren in his chorus. Christ is alive. Let Christians sing. The cross stands empty to the sky. Let streets and homes with praises ring. Love drowned in death shall never die. Christ is alive, no longer bound to distant years in Palestine, but saving, healing, here and now, and touching every place and time, and every insult, rich and war, where colors scorn or wealth divide. Christ suffers still, yet loves the more, and lives where even hope has died. Christ is alive and comes to bring good news to this and every age, till earth and sky and ocean ring, with joy, with justice, love, and praise. I'm going to have the DJ come for our prayer chorus, or yeah. I would ask that you would stay with me. That this would be your opportunity, maybe in your hearts. The prayer altars are not here, but you have these steps, maybe in your own view. Then you would ask yourself those questions. Are you where God wants you to be? Have you accepted that resurrection life that God has for you? You'll sing with me. Is he here? He is home. He is home. He is risen from the dead, and he is home. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. He is Lord. He is Lord. He is risen from the dead, and he is Lord. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Let's pray. Dearly Father, I just ask, Lord, if there's somebody here that hasn't placed you as their Lord of their life, Lord, that they would do that today, Lord, that they would seek you, even in the dark and dirty places that they might find themselves in. Even in those places where they feel like there's no hope and there's no reason for them to be there. They don't know what it is that you want to do in their life, Lord, that they would find that Galilee that you've asked and that you called them to be, Lord. And I just ask that you, Lord, would help them to be obedient in following you, that they would seek you out in their life, that they would seek you out in the situations that they find themselves in, that they would see that you are the Lord. We just praise you for that today. In Jesus' name. Amen.
We're going to sing our benediction together as a reminder that because our Lord lives, we can face tomorrow. We can face whatever is happening in our lives. And we can take that step towards where He's calling us because He lives. If you pull out your red songbooks, okay, and you can turn to number 219 to find the right words to this song. Song number 219. Amen. May you go in His resurrection power today. I would invite those of you with children, if you'd like to stick around, we are going to have a short egg hunt and a little Bible story for them. And all the young people, teenagers, if you guys can help me, I think you guys can hide all the eggs. So thank you. Have a great Easter.
Freaking havoc. Try to have her dinner. Pause a rockets here and there. Oh, rockets. I mean, it's the only way to get through that way.
Mama said you used to walk out in Hampton.